Hey everybody, Ryan Grant here and welcome back to the YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm basically going to be sorting out your eating problems, right? You are eating until you're full, you're eating until you're stuffed, you're eating until you may even feel sick, but you're just not gaining weight, right? I'm going to tell you exactly why that is and how we're going to combat this. But before we do get into this video, I would love it if I could introduce myself to you guys quickly. So my name is Ryan. I turned 20 literally the other day, and over the past 4 years I've dedicated myself to gaining over 27 kilos of lean mass, as you can see on the screen right now. And I'm currently on a mission to help as many as many men as possible do the exact same thing and just basically get them started in the right way. But that's enough about me and about the video, so let's actually get into what you're here for, right? So one thing that I want to make clear with you is that feeling full and eating until you're stuffed and maybe until you even feel a bit sick doesn't mean you're eating in a calorie surplus. They're two completely different things, right? You may be feeling full, however, you could be 1,000 calories away from what you actually need to eat in order to gain weight and gain muscle. So that's one thing I just wanted to make clear with you, right? As painful as it is, the reason why you're not necessarily gaining weight but you feel full all the time is because you're still not eating any calorie surplus. Because I will tell you why. Because it's biologically impossible to eat in a calorie surplus and not gain weight. And we obviously can't go against biology, however, we can change the way we do things. And that is what we're going to do in order to combat this. And I've got 4 things and 4 steps that I want you guys to start taking action on after this video, that is going to make eating in a calorie surplus a lot easier, and you may not even necessarily feel full, right? So without further ado, let's get into the first step. So the first step that I want you to consider is eating smart. So what I mean by eating smart is eating foods that are easy to consume and that don't necessarily fill you up as much. So foods that aren't necessarily that big in volume, but they're more calorie packed, right? So, for example, let me just ask you this question. Why on earth would you eat a 500 calorie meal that is that takes up a full plate in comparison to eating a 500 calorie meal that probably only takes a few mouthfuls, right? There's going to be a big difference in terms of how you're feeling after, and that can most certainly affect how much you eat throughout the day, how full you feel, and that is probably a really big reason as to why you feel full but you're not eating in a surplus. You're just not being smart about the foods you eat. So I'll give you guys a really good example of how I made a meal really calorie dense and didn't necessarily increase the volume or kept the volume to an absolute minimum, right? A meal that I was having when I started bulking was 6 eggs and 2 bits of toast. Don't get me wrong, that is very calorific. That's probably like what, 750 calories maybe, if you consider the butter and all of that stuff. However, I turned this meal from 750 calories to almost probably 1,100 calories just like that, and the volume didn't necessarily change too much. So what I did was I added cheese to the eggs, I also added some smoked salmon, and I also added half an avocado to the side of this meal, and instead of the 2 bits of bread I added 2 bagels, right? And yes, that does increase the volume slightly, however not too much, and just like that I've increased the volume of the food, the calories of the food I should say rather, by almost 400 calories just like that, and the volume hasn't even changed much, and how I'm feeling after the meal will probably be the same as I would have if I was to eat 6 eggs and 2 bits of toast, because the volume hasn't changed much, right? So what you want to do when you're cooking your meals, right, you want to look at how can I make this more dense but not increase the volume? What can I potentially add that won't necessarily harm my health, right? You know, you don't want to be adding oils and stuff because obviously that's where it just gets silly. But you want to look at, right, like, can I add any cheese? Can I add any meat to this, right? What can I do to make this meal more calorie dense, right? For example, with a protein shake, add a banana in there, add some fruit in there, add a bit of peanut butter in there if you have to, right? It's going to stay the same volume like the liquid, right? Just so, you know, or it will barely change, right? And then that's like another 150 to depending on what you add, another 300 calories, right? Just like that in a drink, in liquid, right? So what I would highly suggest is just trying to eat foods that aren't necessarily big in volume but are more calorie compact, and that is how you are going to feel less full and you're able to eat more and then eventually eat in a surplus. So that's the first point. You want to be eating smart, not big, or you don't want to be eating hard, right? So the second thing that I want to go over with you guys on top of that is optimizing your sleep, right? Obviously sleep is super important to human well-being, to living a better quality life, to feeling energized, etc., etc. But it's also crucial to hormone balance and digestive health, right? And going back to feeling energized and well-being, right? The better we sleep, obviously, the better we're going to be feeling. Therefore, the more motivated we're going to be, and that in turn is going to help us feel more motivated to eat more food. However, if we were having a shit sleep, and we're obviously low on energy, and our morale was not very high, then we may not necessarily feel motivated to eat the foods we do. Therefore, it's just going to be a lot harder. And back to the points I was talking about in terms of sleep is really important for the balance of our hormones, right? And if we have a bad sleep, our hormones are going to be messed up, and that also links to the motivation and our desire to actually eat the foods, right? But also this can link to our digestive system and our digestive health, right? The better the sleep we have, the better our digestive system is going to be operating. Therefore, that's obviously going to help us eat more food and feel less full and digest food quicker. So in turn, we're going to feel hungry for more food quicker, right? So making sure you optimize your sleep is super important. So going to bed at the same times every night, right? Not eating or drinking for the absolute minimum an hour before we go to bed. So we're just giving our body time to just sort of wind down before we go to bed, right? So that's the second thing. So obviously we got eat smart, not hard or big, and optimize your sleep, right? So now the penultimate thing that I want to go over with you guys is staying hydrated, right? This is extremely important because this actually helps us expand our stomach, right? And I'm not saying that you're going to get a big stomach and you're going to get fat, but it expands our stomach internally, right? And the more, obviously, you got to think about it. If we keep ourselves hydrated all the time and we keep drinking more water, our stomach obviously has to, it has to, it has to sit with it for a little bit before we disperse of the liquids we've consumed, right? However you want to interpret that. But it has to sit with it, and if we keep keeping ourselves hydrated, our stomach has to obviously adapt to that. Therefore, it's going to start to expand. Therefore, it's going to be a lot easier for us to eat more food because we've got more room in our stomach. Therefore, it's going to be easier to eat more food and in turn eat in a calorie surplus. So that is one thing. Make sure you are staying hydrated, right? And one more thing as well, about hydration is you want to be tactical about the times you drink water. So one thing I learned is that you don't want to like drink lots of water, probably around 30 to 45 minutes before you eat your food. And the main reason this is because water fills you up as well. Obviously, as I said, it sits in your stomach. Therefore, you're going to feel full in the water. And you don't want to feel full before you eat your food because then it's going to be a lot harder to finish your food and obviously eat in a calorie surplus. So, you want to be tactical. So, don't necessarily drink or gulp down a food or shake half an hour or 45 minutes before you eat, but rather save it for when you are eating your meal or after your meal, right? That is something that is very important. And yeah, that's the third thing, right? And the final thing that I want to go over with you guys is spreading out your meal times, right? Spreading out your meal times is super important because it just gives your body it gives your body more time to digest the meals, and B, it's just a lot easier, right? You know, giving yourself 2 to 3 hours between every meal. If you have your first meal at 7 a.m. and then your last meal at 8 p.m., it's just so much easier for your body to operate. compared to if you're just cramming all your calories in at, you know, the final 2 hours of your day, which would also affect your sleep. It's just going to be a lot more difficult, and it's just going to take a toll on you, right? So making sure you spread out your meal times is really important. I'll give you guys a really good example. So at one point from October 2024 to January 2025, this was my, you know, my meal structure. So I ate my first meal at 6:45 in the morning, which was my pre-workout meal because I went to the gym at 7:30. And then when I got back, I had a protein shake at 9:15ish, or whenever I got back from the gym. And then at 1 p.m. I had my lunch, and then at 6:30ish I had my dinner, and then at 8 p.m. I had my final meal, and then I went to bed around 10:30, right? So you can see the meals are really spread out, right? So it's just so much easier, right? And obviously it's going to make you feel less full compared to if you were to absolutely cram your meals at the end of the day. You felt so full, but you still had 1,000 calories left. It's just not efficient, it's just not effective. So make sure you're spreading out your meals throughout the day and keeping the meal times consistent as well. So that is basically the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. I do really appreciate your time. If you are still here, I would absolutely love it if I can invite you to my free online community where I'm currently helping 220 plus men with their weight and muscle gain struggles, and basically just giving them that helping hand and guiding them on taking the right first steps. Because what happens a lot of the time is beginners take the wrong steps when they first start out, and that is why you see 99% of beginners not turn up to the gym again after their first 4 weeks. So if you want my guidance and my personal help on these YouTube videos, my free community is going to be right there. It would be an absolute pleasure. However, if you just want to stay on the channel, then that's completely fine by me. If you did enjoy this video and you found it useful, make sure to drop a thumbs up and drop a comment down below, as that really helps me. And if you want to stay around and you want to learn more from me, I upload every Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, so a subscription would, you know, genuinely mean a lot to me and it'd go a long way. But I haven't really got anything else to say. Have a good day, and I'll see you later.